Hey, it's me, Super Dude, and today I want to talk to you about Frieren. Now, I know there are a lot of videos about Frieren on YouTube at this point. Like, a lot. It is the anime of the moment in a lot of aspects and has surpassed Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood at the top of the My Anime List rankings, though Full Metal always retakes that slot because people are really passionate about FMAB, so who's to say if it'll stay there? It's more to say that this anime is in the upper echelon of very good and everyone knows it, so you probably have already heard some Frieren takes, maybe even several. But I promise I'm trying something different here. So if you could give me a chance for like 5 minutes, I would appreciate it. For those of you who have watched my Baldur's Gate video, first off, thank you. But second, you would be aware that I've been running tabletop RPGs for years now. And one of the principal concerns when running homebrewed TTRPG settings is finding sources for inspiration. If the world is your own, then you have to populate it with stories, characters, heroes and villains, interesting places and ideas, and all that takes a lot of imagination. Perhaps too much imagination. To make a truly cohesive world of any scale, you're inevitably going to pull from your lived experience, or take inspiration from people, stories, or historical events, even if accidentally. I remember early on when I was making my setting, I was trying to make an elven city, and I was trying to think up a name for that city, and I was like, Rivendell? Rivendell sounds good. That has an elven feel to it. And my fiance had to point out to me that Rivendell is very close to Rivendell, which is, the place where Frodo goes. The Elven City in Lord of the Rings. This is part of the reason why the Dungeon Master's Guide ends with a list of books and movies to read and watch, as does the Lazy Dungeon Master, and why any writer's advice for improving is to keep reading and keep writing. The more encyclopedic your references, the more you have to pull from to produce something new from the parts. All of your memories and experiences are great for making human stories, but for the fantastical genres of fantasy and sci-fi, you often have characters from entirely different species, complete with different methods of thinking, body types, cultures, and perceptions of themselves, others, and the world they inhabit. Not everything about you should map onto their perspective, so how do you get inspiration for writing and role-playing an alien perspective? We could look at other fantastical stories for inspiration, but your mileage may vary. Some of the times you get some truly alien creatures, and other times you get basically humans, only different from us in terms of aging or body shape. Or the fraught path of adapting humans from a non-majority culture to be your alien species, so there's a decent chance it'll seem alien to your Western audience, but this is a dangerous path to take, threatening to misrepresent or tokenize a group into stereotypes and imply some pretty nasty things about the real-life groups from which you took inspiration. This topic and its usage is very much not black and white, but honestly, it's out of scope of this video because it's fundamentally not what I'm talking about. I want a truly alien species, and there's nothing alien about our fellow humans. We may be culturally different, but we both still have a fundamental human core to us. I'm getting in the weeds. What I'm trying to say is creating truly alien sentience is hard, even for people whose job it is to write that sentience. Now imagine instead you're just like a person making a dwarven character in your Sunday night D&D game, and you can see how this is a complicated trick to attempt. I am presently running a game with lots of elves in it, and what everyone did was make their characters around 100 years old at the oldest, if not partially human. I call this the Liara effect, where, sure, this species is capable of living for a millennia, but it's hard to conceptualize what that would be like for us role-players, so we choose the youngest possible version of that species that is still recognizably our age. Helps us to empathize, you see. And this is off topic, but we all know what the real answer to this question is, right? It's hard to put yourself in the headspace of something so alien. And I don't blame my players for sidestepping the attempt and going with a more human headspace. It ain't easy, even for professionals. That is why I think Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, is a fantastic work for any fantasy lover, not just anime fans, because the show does an impressive job showing what the world is like from the perspective of an elf, showing how the world looks and reacts to their longevity, as well as how they solve problems, and how that crucial difference in perspective from the human one allows both parties to learn and grow from being in each other's company. This is a great source of inspiration for any interested in the elven headspace, but indeed any long-lived species, and I would like to examine that in this video. Now for some disclaimers, I do not plan on being kind with the spoiler squeamish in this video. I will talk about everything from the front to the back of the show and my journey to illustrate my point. So if you haven't seen the show and are on the fence, here are some quick reasons to watch it. Art good, characters good, writing good. And also, it's not just another copy-paste fantasy show. Nothing against you if you like isekai, but if you scroll through the titles of those series, you really get the sense that they have a hard time differentiating themselves from the pack. Frieren is not suffering from that, and as a game master, anytime a world does something that isn't Lord of the Rings or Forgotten Realms, it has my attention. And while those tidbits that show that this isn't just generic fantasy are nice for me, it's never really the focus, because this is all a very character-driven story. If it doesn't matter to Frieren, it doesn't matter at all. So that's the quick sell. If you haven't watched Beyond Journey's End, you really need to. And also, I will be spoiling stuff up and down this show's first season, so if you stick around, you can't say I didn't warn you. Also, while I know a lot of people watch this in Japanese, I'm going to be trying to pronounce the names as their authentic German pronunciations as best I can. I say as best I can because I already know that I have failed multiple times in recording this. I just know that in advance. But I promise you that I'm trying, so please grant me that grace. I'm trying my best. Lastly, I will refer to the character as Frieren and the show as Beyond Journey's End, even if the true title of the show is Frieren Beyond Journey's End, for clarity's sake. Cool? Alright, let's get into it. Frieren Beyond Journey's End lets you know its deal right from the title. The most important point in this world's history has already come to pass. The show opens right after the hero party returns triumphant from a 10-year journey to defeat the Demon King, ushering in a new era of peace and prosperity the world over. Not that this matters, though. The entirety of the celebration happens within 6 minutes for us, ending with the other characters reminiscing about their misadventures contained within the greater journey. Frieren cuts through that, though, saying,
"Our adventure was a mere 10 years.
The others try not to let this bother them. The next day, Frieren sets off on her own to explore and learn new spells. Less than a minute passes on our side before 50 years have passed. And almost due to happenstance, she remembers that Himmel the hero is holding on to something for her, and she wonders how he's doing. This is the first time she's actually referred to any of the party members by name, by the way. She returns to find him an old man, much to her surprise, and they all take off together to see the Era meteor shower again, as they did on the night of their celebration, but this time from her special spot in the mountains, where the sky is clear and the majesty of the shower is on full display. The music swelling, the colors exploding across the screen, this is our climactic moment for the first episode. Not the defeat of the Demon King, nor their return, but this moment in the mountains. Why this moment? Because this show is about Frieren. Frieren couldn't be bothered with the Demon King. It was a mere 10 years, after all. But this, appreciating the beauty of the world, catching up with friends you haven't seen in a bit, that's something worth celebrating. The writing of Beyond Journey's End is lockstep with Frieren's headspace most of the time, and that shows with where narrative weight is placed in this episode. Though Frieren doesn't realize it, this moment, this week's hike into the mountains, would be Himmel's last. And it is here when Frieren comes to an emotional understanding of how short a human's life really is. When all you do is travel, it is rare to see the same person twice. She had an intellectual understanding of aging, but she had never stuck around anyone long enough to see it. Now that she's seen its effects, images of Himmel and company flood her mind, realizing that this is it. It was a mere 10 years, but it was only 10 years. She doesn't have enough memories of him. She never got to know him. Not really. And that hurts. She reflects on this ring, which we'll be talking about later, and sets off for another journey, this time to learn more about the humans. Skipping 20 years, she is tricked by Heiter, the priest from the hero party, to take his adopted daughter Fern in as her student. He's a bit of a bastard, you see. Soon after, Heiter himself dies, once again hammering home Frieren's lack of understanding for the human condition. Though this time is a bit different from when Himmel died, pause if you want to read, and takes off with Fern on a new journey. By this point, it's been at least 74 years since the Demon King's defeat, and 24 years since Himmel's death, and Frieren has made little progress in understanding the human condition. But Fern will change that for Frieren a great deal in the short time that they have together. The only truly alien aspect of Frieren we've seen so far is that she experiences time differently, but this extends to her problem solving as well. The principal example of this in the show's run is Qual, a captain of the Demon King's army who developed one of the most sophisticated killing spells in history, Zoltraak. A spell so powerful that the hero party couldn't defeat him, so they sealed him away, delaying the encounter by 80 years. During that time, humans studied Zoltraak and incorporated it into their magic system until it became nothing more than ordinary offensive magic, as well as developing defensive systems that could account for Zoltraak's strengths and weaknesses. Frieren destroys Qual with her own Zoltraak, which we've been seeing for multiple episodes now, by the way. Frieren was literally casting as a child. Beyond Journey's End does this a lot. Characters will explain something later that has been visually present in previous episodes, showing off the competency of Fern and Frieren as mages, or serves to make characters more dynamic than we could have known about at first blush. The Zoltraak moment serves two purposes. To show Frieren's growth across these 80 years and ability to use time as a tool to solve her problems, but it also shows the human strength of progress. 80 years is a huge amount of time on the human timescale, and it is only because of human research that Zoltraak became both far stronger than it ever was in Qual's hands, and also not a big deal. A spell a child could cast. A prodigal child, but still. We will discuss the human strength later, but this moment shows Frieren's power over time. And though we won't really see it again, because few of her foes are ever as ancient, it's still one of the standout moments in the series to show off her strength and intelligence. Good thing it's in episode 3 then, putting their best foot forward early. Frieren's full view of time and her training over the years makes her one of those classic OP main characters that is its own archetype in shonen battle animes, but we rarely see her pop off unlike in those other shows. Why is that? Frieren rarely pushes herself to her limit for the same reason Shigeo Kageyama from Mob Psycho 100 doesn't. Going all out with your abilities is flashy, unnecessary, and doesn't provide the optimal path towards their respective goals. For Mob, his holding back often has to do with the fact that he doesn't consider his psychic powers anything to write home about. His unrivaled telekinetic prowess doesn't make him a good person, or strong, or attractive, it's just one aspect of him, and they aren't an effective tool for his betterment, so he rarely uses them, opting for more conventional methods of self-actualization. Frieren has existed for so long that her training has made her, with one known exception, unrivaled in magical ability. But Frieren is not an ambitious person, so she isn't one to pull out the big spells for any old monster. Frieren's want is to learn more about the human condition, and this isn't a way to get people to talk to you. When she does fight, she only uses the base amount of mana necessary to win while using standard spells, the style of fighting taught to her by her master and refined over centuries of practice, and passed on to Fern. In both of these instances, we don't see power getting these characters what they want, only development does that, so they're both relaxed in their OP natures, saving power for when it is necessary. Besides, there are other elven characters that we can talk about if we want to see what type of power is rewarded in this world. We see 3 elves over the course of the first season: Frieren, Kraft, and Serie. Kraft has done something great for the world in the past, but that event has completely faded from human memory, a fact that seems to injure him. He stands as a look into the future of Himmel's legacy. If no one exists to carry Himmel's memory into the future, even the savior of humanity will be forgotten. But this fate is even more painful for someone like Kraft because he is still here, still alive. Hundreds, potentially thousands of years of existence and good deeds just gone because humans don't live long enough to remember you. But Serie is far more interesting in this department. Unlike Frieren, Serie is ambitious, having opinions on what should be done with the gift of magic and exerting that idea onto the world. She taught Flamma, often called the legendary mage in the modern day, from which Frieren learned many of her own abilities. Flamma was a human mage who was initially responsible for setting up the kingdom's state of learning, making magic more accessible for others than ever before. After Flamma's passing, she had hoped that Serie would take over in this pursuit, further assisting humanity's fledgling magic interest. But Serie has a different outlook. She believes magic should be special. Letting just anyone use it would be disrespectful to the power of magic. But as we see in the modern day, she has complied with Flamma's request, in her way. Magic is spread the world over, sure, but those who want to be recognized as exceptional magicians must go through a rigorous testing process, with some tests having no clear solutions and others liable to get you killed, all in the name of taking the title of first-class mage. And one more thing. To receive a spell from Serie's collection, a collection rumored to contain any spell in the world. So what does this achieve? Through Serie's interest in keeping magic special, she has taken the imperial learning system of Flamma's dreams and constructed a pyramid from it. Any mages vying for the upper ranks must be willing to fight each other or even die for that position, all for status, power, and to have a wish granted by Serie, who sits on top of that pyramid. What makes this system particularly elven is that all the humans in this world regard this as normal. Vern remarks multiple times on their journey that only first-class mages can walk in the northern continent freely, and every human in the society has existed inside of the kingdom's rule for centuries. Generation upon generation of people who think nothing of Serie's magic hegemony, or how her beliefs about magic have unwittingly become theirs. A whole empire's belief around magic being cultivated and shaped by a single individual's beliefs on magic's function, a directed use of soft power over a political system for centuries. That is the power of an elf who wants something. For nearly 20 episodes, Serie is never mentioned nor thought about, but her pressure on the society is never too far off. She's in every opener, after all. She cannot be avoided. And while you spend untold episodes learning about Frieren and Fern, later Stark and Zine, and the old party, Serie hangs over all of it, beyond Journey's End's actual most OP character. Serie is a very ambitious elf, but as I said earlier, Frieren has no such ambitions for herself. Frieren is one of the most powerful mages in the world, but despite this, she doesn't say she loves magic, she just likes it. She doesn't want for much, she just travels from place to place collecting these spells that she likes. This is what Flamma thought made Frieren special. I pointed out that Serie and Flamma are two very ambitious people. One changed the world, and the other continues to shape the world actively. Frieren is a character who wants for little, what Flemma called a Mage of Peacetime. As Serie actively demonstrates, if Frieren actually wanted something, if she put all of her drive and long-lived lifespan towards something, there's a chance no one could stop her. But that is exactly the thing that makes her special. She is a Mage of Peace, the one who could defeat the Demon King and then not become one herself. But we do see glimpses of this world where Frieren was this dangerous, driven, world-destroying foe in the demons and her copy. The demons literally have a special name for Frieren, as she is so long-lived that she is a bogeyman amongst their people, her hatred for them being known across multiple generations and now being a horror story to them. And her copy stands as a dark mirror to the Frieren we know, figuratively and literally. Thanks to the copy, we don't need to imagine a Frieren who uses all of her powers to crush others, regardless of their sapience or humanity. Or elvanity? I run into this problem all the time. Humanoid is a human-centric word. We need a better word for humanoid beings in fantasy settings. If anyone has any, please leave a comment. I've been dealing with this for years. Anyway, we don't need to imagine that callous Frieren. This is her, right here. I shudder to think what would happen if this one was out in the world, what devastation it could cause. So in this character, we have a nearly all-powerful figure with a full view over time, giving her significant advantages in this world. But being an elf isn't without its drawbacks. For one, Frieren seems to be a high-functioning autistic person. As an aside, no, I don't think Frieren is supposed to be autistic in this story, but much like how Data from Star Trek Next Generation is often read as autistic for his misreading of emotions or social situations, a lot of neurodivergent behavior can be found in Frieren, much like I previously said about Komi. And her journey to try and understand her human compatriots and therefore come to an emotional understanding of their journey mirrors a lot of the observations necessary for an autistic person to develop an understanding of sociality and the mask that isn't ingrained in us autistic peoples. It doesn't map one-to-one, obviously. Frieren will never find herself fully understanding humanity, just like a neurodivergent person will never become neurotypical in their entire life. But I found a lot of my own experience in Frieren, and since I am autistic, I see my autism in her. If that makes you upset that I see myself in characters, that I feel a connection there, even if it's not textual, I find it weird that that would bother you. Intentional or not, writers sometimes write things into characters that they didn't intend, but it's there for others to find, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Anyway, back on topic. Frieren has a hard time understanding the emotions or thoughts of her human companions, which is often represented by her flashbacks to the original party. Flashbacks are used constantly and consistently throughout the show, but in the first episode, the flashbacks are very few due to where Frieren is at that point in her life. We see scenes from the hero party's collective past as narrated by the other members, but Frieren does not contribute. Only after Himmel's death does Frieren have flashbacks from their time together, but just flashes. Pictures in her mind, nothing more solid than that. Our first real flashback of Himmel is in episode 2, where we see Himmel talk about the flowers of his hometown, but let's shelf the flower talk, that's important for a later point. I want to focus instead on episode 3, where Fern points out Frieren's affinity for Merkel pudding, something Himmel did all the way back then. Himmel says, when you've known someone for long enough, you pick up on the little things about a person. This sentiment wounds Frieren, though, because both then and now, she couldn't tell you anything about her party members, despite them demonstrating the reverse. She had a long way to go in episode 3, and she still has much to learn, and always will. But this moment serves as our first glimpse into Frieren's dynamic with her current party. Frieren does not inherently understand the thoughts and emotions of her companions, but sometimes she sees something in them that reminds her of Himmel, and it puts things into perspective for her. She begins to understand a bit of the human condition by seeing that it wasn't just Himmel being Himmel, but perhaps a more human trait. With each flashback, she grows to appreciate her current crew and understands Himmel a bit more as well. After Stark joins the party, he serves as a window to Eisen, the dwarven hero of the hero party, and his faults and fears, as well as seeing how Fern and Stark respond to each other, and through them, understanding the real significance of that ring she keeps. Somewhere inside of her, she may have had an idea of what this ring meant, but through watching these two dumbasses slowly down their armor around each other and, dare I say it, fall in love, she realizes Himmel loved her too. Maybe she loved him as well. This is the core of Beyond Journey's End, the central strength of this series. Growing empathy, gained through trying to understand others, and letting that greater understanding make both your current and previous relationships more meaningful. Beyond Journey's End is a shonen, meaning it's made for young boys, right? I can think of few better sentiments than engaging with everyone in your life with empathy and understanding. Another consequence of her age is that Frieren's effectively a folk mage, or hedge mage in Dragon Age terms. I'm planting the seeds now. Dragon Age video incoming. Look for it in months. Being a hedge mage has its advantages, like having the folk spell for catching birds in her pocket for the bird catching challenge, and being overall unpredictable to her colleagues. But other times it's a detriment, like her inability to detect mana while casting. Something all rookie mages learn to get over early on, and is a point of embarrassment for Frieren. You see, we say all mages overcome this weakness, but Frieren is over 1,000 years old, over 1,000 years to hammer in sloppy mistakes. Sure, she's all-powerful, but she's effectively an apprentice of one of the earliest mages. There was no rulebook then like there is now. Frieren says it best to Fern before the Dark Frieren fight. She has had 1,000 years to learn magic, and she knows a lot. She knows spells you wouldn't believe exist. But Zoltraak, a spell that's 80 years old, is etched into the human magical identity so deeply that Fern was casting it as a child. For Frieren, that is a relatively new spell that takes some time to pull out of her lexicon, which makes her slow on the draw. For Fern, it's as simple as breathing. This forms the linchpin of their plan for defeating Frieren's other me. She can match it toe-to-toe in a fight, but Fern's speed, Fern's lifetime of focus, is the tip of the spear. The death blow will be delivered by Fern. This doesn't prove true, because Fern still has a lot to learn, but as Serie said to Frieren hundreds of years ago now, it is that precision of focus, the human ambition, that would someday defeat Frieren. It's just that that day wasn't today. This is the other half of Serie's feelings on the magic debate that I referenced earlier, the relentless strength of human progress. Serie was aware that this standardization of magic that Flemma wrought would be unstoppable, that humans would take to magic and expand it in directions she could not conceive of. Serie isn't one to say what she means, in fact, often saying the opposite of what she means, so we are only left to guess, but perhaps her initial denial of Flemma's call to help the human mages came from a place of fear, dreading what magic would become with the progress of humans pushing it in the coming centuries. Elves hold the threads of history in the palms of their hands, and if so inclined, shape it. But humans are chaotic, uncontrollable, passionate, and perhaps Serie feared what would become of her if the humans were left unchecked. So she took her place on top of the hierarchy, to control the march of progress. Or maybe, to be kinder to her than I've been at every other point so far in this video, perhaps Serie loved Flemma, just as Frieren has learned to care and love Fern, and decided to follow Flemma's request after all, in her own way. Despite her short life, Flemma achieved something Serie never thought possible, as well as setting Frieren on the trajectory to help save the world from evil. Serie recognizes that, and perhaps due to that fact, followed in Flemma's wishes after all, seeking to grow her vision further, maintaining her legacy for all time, in her way of course, as a show of love to her student and child. Who's to say what's true? Beyond Journey's End is pretty subtle with how it handles Serie, rarely revealing what she's really thinking. She exclaims that training humans is a waste, and yet seems excited at the possibility of taking Fern on as her student. She says she regrets teaching Flemma, and yet remembers her favorite spell. Actually, she remembers the favorite spell of every student she's ever had. That doesn't sound like an uncaring teacher to me. Though Serie is the most enigmatic, Beyond Journey's End makes it clear that no character in its story is without compassion, and we should try our best to understand and empathize with all of them. Except monsters and demons, of course. There was a lot of discourse around the complete evil of the demons online that I completely missed. You can watch other videos if you have an interest in seeing what they were talking about. I previously said I don't really like completely evil sentient races, but I feel Beyond Journey's End does a good job showing what it is about demons that makes them abjectly monstrous beings, as well as showing why Frieren hates them so much. Evil species can be done right, and I think Beyond Journey's End does a good job in that regard. It does muddy my greater point, but what can you do? It's almost like the story is more complicated than any one theme, and I think that's probably a boon and not a bane. Anyway, I've been doing a lot of table setting here to finally get around to my final point. Frieren's conception as the Mage of Peace, Himmel's love for her, the relationship between Flemma, Serie, and Frieren, all comes to a head here, with this spell. Let me explain. Serie and Frieren are elves of diametrically opposed magical philosophy, and standing between both of them is Flemma. Flemma left two major gifts to Frieren, her demon fighting technique and her favorite spell. Flemma's methods of fighting demons flies in the face of typical conventions around magic, concealing her mana purposefully in order to get close to demons and deal a killing blow. You see, demons are naturally gifted in magic, and put their minds towards its pursuit above all else. As a result, demon society, if we could call it that, is based around magical prowess alone. If one demon has more mana than the other, then that other one knows better than to mess with it directly. Magical might makes right. Flemma's technique short-circuits their societal beliefs around magic. After all, if your magical prowess is your measure of worth in this world, why would anyone purposefully choose to be lesser? Frieren lost her home young as a result of a demon attack. We could assume a similar tale for Flemma. To these two, it isn't about showing your awesome power. It's about killing demons. The demons see this as a bastardization of the gift of magic. Taking your power and willfully hiding it? Sacrilege. And given what we know about Serie's magical beliefs, she likely agrees somewhat, though, again, she's very enigmatic. We see her using this very ability later, so who's to say how she really feels about it? Flemma agreed that this was a bastardization of magic, but it was a method she came up with to fight demons, and an effective one at that. And she even theorized that it may just be enough to defeat the Demon King. Her second gift to Frieren was her favorite spell, the Field of Flowers. Works as advertised, creates a bed of flowers. A truly harmless spell, but looks pretty. In these two gifts, we see Flemma's anger towards demons, but also her greater capacity for kindness and frivolity as compared to her master. And Frieren took both of these gifts into the future as Flemma's bid to produce a successor worthy of saving the world. How did these gifts fare then? Concealing Mana is an exceptionally powerful gift, giving Frieren the highest demon kill count of any living being. But against the Demon King? We are not directly told how effective this trick was against their primary foe, but Frieren admits that if it weren't for the hero party, if any of them were missing, they wouldn't have won. Serie mocks Frieren for this, noting that Frieren is essentially a failure. Flemma's technique did nothing to aid her in that destined battle, and if it weren't for her party, she would have died there. And sure, that may be true. But Frieren wasn't there just to test a trick against the Demon King. Which begs the question, why Frieren? We've seen at this point that Himmel went with the rest of the crew into the forest searching specifically for the elven mage of the forest. We know he was looking for her in particular. So why her, and not some other mage? That's because Himmel wasn't meeting Frieren for the first time here, but here. As a young boy who got lost in the forest, and a standoffish older elf showed him the way home. And when he didn't move because he was too wary of this foreign elven figure, she took a moment and cast the Field of Flowers, showing the beauty of magic to a scared and lost child in a moment that changed his life. So he went home, he trained, he grew up. He asked that same elf to adventure with him to defeat the Demon King, and together, with her colleagues, they did so. And here, facing off with Serie 79 years later, this Frieren understands that it wasn't her trick that helped defeat the Demon King, but her master's favorite spell. A spell that captured little Himmel's heart and kept her in his thoughts for more than a decade, is what caused him to return to her, and then a mere 10 years later, defeat the Demon King. It was Frieren's capacity for peace, her gentle nature, that gave Himmel hope, and he in turn became a beacon of hope for all peoples, helping random passerby no matter how small their problems, erecting statues of himself to continue spreading hope into the future, and encouraging countless others in that future to live by his example. And that is only possible due to her long life, how she carried lessons from hundreds of years earlier, and influenced little Himmel into becoming the world's savior. She would have died there without her compatriots, sure. But if it weren't for kindness, if it weren't for Frieren, none of them would have had that shot in the first place. Thanks to Frieren and Serie's influence, the world finds itself in a new era, and we must ask ourselves a question. In this age, what is the most useful spell you could think of? A spell that blights plants? A black hole? Whatever the hell this thing is? According to Fern, it's prestidigitation, the spell that cleans your laundry and gives it a fresh scent. And honestly, after spending 28 episodes with Frieren, I can't help but agree. I am Super Dude. Thanks for watching. So yeah, that's the video. Hopefully it brought something new to the table in this deluge of analysis Frieren has received. There's just so much depth of detail and character in this anime and manga that you could really just pick any subject and get lost talking about it. I have almost exclusively talked about Frieren and Serie, and the video was, as of recording, 30-ish minutes long. There are so many characters I mentioned once or straight up never talked about, so I hope this helps demonstrate the density of storytelling on display by Yamada. Hopefully this proved insightful for anyone wanting to make stories about long-lived characters, and if you for some reason are still watching and didn't see Beyond Journey's End, I haven't even scratched the surface of all that's great about the show. If this video and the greater cultural consensus hasn't convinced you, then I don't know, man. I give up. I guess you're built different. Here's your contrarian gold star. You're very cool, very based. I want to grow up to be like you someday. Finally, I would like to thank my patrons for their generosity in helping fund this little adventure of mine. Through your patronage, I am able to put some funds back into getting better gear, improving my craft, and hopefully getting another new mic. I'm a bit too loud, so I peak this one a lot. I need a mic that I can yell into. So I guess if any of y'all have recommendations, do let me know. Anyway, signing up on Patreon gets your name in the video, allows you to see them early, and sometimes I ask questions, though that's been rare. Need to get better about doing that. Anyway, that's it. Thank you so much for your generosity, it means a lot, as well as to the general YouTube crowd that stayed till the end. For that, you get a cookie. Let me know your Frieren thoughts and indeed other good alien media thoughts in the comments. Thanks, love you, bye!